right now I'm at about 56% Elijah Mitchell. And I could be completely wrong with Elijah Mitchell. Again, I drafted early kind of before and have been drafting throughout, before kind of the hamstring with Elijah and then, these talks of, Jordan Mason. I don't know. We'll have to see. I'm definitely going to try and get some more Jordan Mason. But really what this is essentially a bet against C-Mac staying healthy. And I bring it up because a lot of handcuffs go super, super early, And we talked about this on the pod a lot where a handcuff is a lottery pick. Yes, ideally your handcuff is in the greatest situation and he's, going to be in a workhorse workload. But even oftentimes when we envision that, we're wrong. Prime example, Jerome Ford last year. And I was high on Jerome Ford last year. He was one of my higher owned, especially handcuffs last year, because I felt like if Nick Chubb goes down, Jerome Ford is just going to absolutely destroy in this offense. And what happened? These are things that we don't consider, but that always happen, is that the organization doesn't just say, okay, we're going to slot in, running back B for running back A because running back A is hurt. The organization looks at the landscape. Who else is out there? Kareem Hunt's out there. Kareem Hunt, on a broken leg or whatever injury he played throughout the entire season, came off the couch and took all the high-value touches. And if you owned Jerome Ford last year, it was the most frustrating player ever from a standpoint of he would just give you 11 or 13 points a game, So, you started him, but you almost got nothing out of it. And to me, it was just sort of kind of a wasted pick.
What?
Why are you shaking your head? You're welcome.
Well, let's get into the players you're super excited to draft. Maybe your must-draft players. Yeah. Maybe the players you're building your entire draft around. Maybe your highest owned players. I know you're a lot more conservative than me, and I think that's a function of drafting 70 plus teams. You sort of have to be.
Yeah.
But can you give us four names?
Yeah.
Maybe one at each position, or just your top four. I know you do. I know there's going to be a lot of these FFPC pros watching this, so I appreciate you giving what you can. If you got to censor yourself on some of them,
I podcast and do a show once a week. So, most people are somewhat aware. That's the beauty of it all is that I think people listen and they, still kind of, listen to other people as well and they'll formulate their own opinions. So there's enough, sound advice out there that I don't have to feel that anyone's, absolutely leaning on my thoughts alone. But, we started at the quarterback position. We've already talked about Jayden Daniels, and I would just have to bring that up again. I mean, I can't stress enough. I think the luxury of me drafting very early on and kind of throughout the offseason, and I've just been able to absolutely hammer that, is my highest owned or my second highest owned quarterback at the moment. And, until he kind of gets to an unacceptable range, I'm just going to absolutely destroy, or, make sure I'm, drafting him as much as possible. And that's because there are plenty of quarterbacks that go after him that I feel just as comfortable with backing him up. And that kind of gets me to the second guy, as far as at the quarterback position. We talked about Jalen Hurts. I don't have a lot of him because I'm typically waiting, but I do like him. But the guy that I, is probably my, second highest owned right now is Trevor Lawrence. So there is just, and with the caveat that, Doug Peterson offense, some questionable play calling. I don't know if he was calling plays last year. Maybe I think he kind of took it over at the end, but But I just felt like he didn't have the right personnel in the right places. And a lot of guys were playing out of position. And I feel like now he has the right player personnel in the right positions. Trevor Lawrence was hurt quite a bit last year. The offensive line was banged up quite a bit last year. I think they're going to be now playing in a division that just seems actually, it used to be the, the stinker of the South. Now we have some potential breakout offenses. Obviously we have, the Texans, but Tennessee could be moving at a quicker pace. So, the Colts, obviously, with their offense. So they may, they're in an offense or in a division now where they're probably going to have to score points. I also think that we saw ETN, to me, the way, when I watched the Jaguars, I think they threw a fair amount in the red zone. And I think we may see some regression on both ends. I mean, I think we may see some regression from the TD department with ETN, where he scores less TDs. And I think we may end up seeing the positive regression with Trevor Lawrence. Don't quote me on this, but I think he had was near the top of the league as far as drops, end zone drops, as far as, interceptions that weren't necessarily his fault. I can remember two off the top of my head of Tank Bigsby, balls going straight through his hands and into a defender's hand. And again, one thing with Trevor Lawrence too as well is that he has some untapped rushing potential as well. Like, he can get you 3 to 5 TDs a year. He can get you a couple of rushing yards, and that helps. So he's a guy that, given where he goes, I mean, he is going super late. And I find it hard for him, kind of not to finish in the top 12, because I still think that this is a passing offense. And I love that ETN is a pass catching running back too. So it's not like ETN can't win and Trevor Lawrence can't win together. So he's definitely one on the quarterback side of things where I think he's being slept on. And I'll just throw Deshaun Watson out there because he's going super late. And if it doesn't work out, you can easily cut him. But he's a guy too as well. Like, that offense, the coaching staff, the GM, they're telling us that they want to be a passing offense. They're not going to have Nick Chubb for a foreseeable amount of time. And if they're spreading things out, if they're running more 3 wide receiver sets, they have a ton of talent, with the receivers. He doesn't have to do much. And with as bad as he played last year, I think he still scored or averaged about 20 points per game. And that was like him at his absolute worst. So that's another guy that I would consider, especially like in best ball formats. It may not feel good, but it's easy. It's a button I would click on for sure.
Yeah. So there's a lot I agree with here. Specifically with Jayden Daniels, you must draft. Like, how many times have I done this now where it's just like 2019 Lamar, 2020 Josh Allen, 2021 Jalen Hurts, Justin Fields the next year, Anthony Richardson last year, good process, bad results. But it's like, give me the young guy who runs that everyone's sleeping on, and it just works. It works out just about every single time. Deshaun Watson, I'm with you. I think he has underrated rushing upside. You're not going to find any upside like that late in the draft, but it's also like the Browns keep telling us they want to lead the league in pace of play this year. They want to reshape their offensive identity to look a lot like what it looked like under Joe Flacco, where they go extremely pass heavy. You said that so many times, and look at what Joe Flacco did. Joe Flacco was a top 3 fantasy point per game quarterback last year. I think even if Deshaun Watson lost something, he could replicate that. But there's also hey, he lost a full year. Last year he was hurt. And like you said, he was putting up points despite playing really poorly. Trevor Lawrence is the one I'm going to push back on, but I just don't know that I'm right here. I think I just like the bit I've been doing that Trevor Lawrence is a bust. It's just funny to me to rile up Jaguars fans. So 50 career games. He's thrown over 333 passing yards only twice, which is the same as Mike White in 1/8 as many starts, which is half as many as CJ Stroud and a fifth as many starts. But again, he could, just finally live up to his potential. So I think I'm just biased because I like pissing off Jaguars fans a lot, but I could certainly see that playing out.
I'll add this one last thing with Trevor Lawrence. I've never been a Trevor Lawrence fan. I was completely against the idea of him being this. People were using the term generational talent. And I just, watching him at Clemson, I was like, I don't know how you could possibly tell. I don't know how you could possibly tell. Guys are wide open in space. It was just, it was a perfect setup. There's not really much that he had to do, to succeed in that type of system and in that type of offense. But I was also out on him last year. Last year, he was going in round 6, and he was sort of kind of a potential breakout candidate. He was a guy that I think a lot of people were targeting as sort of kind of that lower, mid-tier quarterback. So I've never really been – this is the first year that I'm actually in on Trevor Lawrence. So if that means anything, take it that with a grain of salt. But yeah, that'll be interesting to see. So, either him or Jayden Daniels needs to work out because most of my teams are Jayden Daniels, T. Lawrence combinations.
Okay. All right. Well, give me a few more names if you don't mind.
All right.
We'll count that as one.
Any position?
Any position.
Any position. So if I'm looking at I'm just going to go to my percentage, my ownership percentage. Okay. So right now I'm at about 56% Elijah Mitchell. And I could be completely wrong with Elijah Mitchell. Again, I drafted early kind of before and have been drafting throughout, before kind of the hamstring with Elijah and then, these talks of, Jordan Mason. I don't know. We'll have to see. I'm definitely going to try and get some more Jordan Mason. But really what this is essentially a bet against C-Mac staying healthy, which is something I've never really done in the past. So we're going to, if C-Mac goes down for any extended period of time or especially during the money weeks, and Elijah Mitchell's the guy, that's going to be something that's going to be very fruitful. And I bring it up because a lot of handcuffs go super, super early, and we talked about this on the pod a lot where a handcuff is a lottery pick. Yes, ideally your handcuff is in the greatest situation and he's, going to be in a workhorse workload. But even oftentimes when we envision that, we're wrong. Prime example, Jerome Ford last year. And I was high on Jerome Ford last year. He was one of my higher owned, especially handcuffs last year, because I felt like if Nick Chubb goes down, Jerome Ford is just going to absolutely destroy in this offense. And what happened? These are things that we don't consider, but that always happen, is that the organization doesn't just say, okay, we're going to slot in, running back B for running back A because running back A is hurt. The organization looks at the landscape. Who else is out there? Kareem Hunt's out there. Kareem Hunt, on a broken leg or whatever injury he played throughout the entire season, came off the couch and took all the high-value touches. And if you owned Jerome Ford last year, it was the most frustrating player ever from a standpoint of he would just give you 11 or 13 points a game, So, you started him, but you almost got nothing out of it. And to me, it was just sort of kind of a wasted pick. And it was one of those things that no one could have foreseen the idea of Jerome Ford not being the true handcuff. So I don't like to invest a lot of high draft capital in these high-end handcuffs. And what inevitably happens, too, is that throughout the offseason, some news will come out, especially with the rookies. Trey Benson was going so high. So I had very little Trey Benson because he was going so high. And now we got news coming out that DeMarcado maybe, and I'm not really buying this because I've seen DeMarcado and I'm not buying. But we got the news of DeMarcado. We got the news of, Carter. Maybe even if he, does ascend, he's really only a 2-down back. Who knows? But now is the perfect time to get in on Trey Benson. Now I'm smashing the Trey Benson. So I like to not waste my 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th round, maybe even 11th round picks on these high-end handcuffs. And I like to target these guys later because it's the similar kind of reasoning with the quarterback and with the tight end. Those are prime rounds where you get breakout talent. You get breakout players. And I don't want to just have a lottery pick. I want to have a guy that actually has an opportunity. I don't know if it's Khalil Shakir or Curtis Samuel. Maybe it's neither, but what if it's one of them? That's where those handcuffs go. So that's the only reason I bring up Elijah Mitchell. You threw up in your mouth when I mentioned DeAndre Swift, but surprisingly, he actually is my second.
Let me stop on Elijah Mitchell. I'll go back.
Yeah.
I just want to say I completely agree.
Yeah.
So Jordan Mason is getting a lot of hype now, in part because Mitchell's banged up.
Yeah.
And he's frequently banged up. But David Lombardi, their best beat writer, just like a month ago, was like, no. Yeah. Mitchell is the clear number 2.
Yeah.
I'm with you. I don't like expensive handcuffs because we can't predict injuries. But what we can predict is contingent upside. And you have to think that RB1 for the 49ers has a ton of upside. You can't predict injuries, but you can see which running backs are the most injury prone. And you mentioned Trey Benson. So James Conner, Christian McCaffrey have to be at the top of that list.
Yeah.
McCaffrey nearing the age cliff or already passed it. He had 400 plus touches, including the postseason last year. And so with handcuffs, I typically like the latest round handcuffs because you can't predict injuries and the ones with the most contingent upside. And I have to say, Elijah Mitchell really stands out. But why didn't you sell me on DeAndre Swift? I'm sorry, but that one's a struggle for me. I see a 3-way committee, but tell me what you see.
Yeah, so I'm a Longhorn alum, okay? So I've seen, the guys that come out of, UT, I've seen, okay? And I love Roschon as a player, but I just don't think he's that guy. So Roschon, I'm not really even concerned about. If someone were to go down and they had to rely on Roschon's like a good, solid player. But to me, he's more of like a special team player, kind of a situational player. I don't view him as like a workhorse back. Khalil Herbert, I thought was good. I still think is good. But, I mean, how much more do we have to listen to? They drafted Roschon, and then I think they found out. You could tell based on the usage, even when all the guys went out and when all the guys were hurt, you can tell that they realized, okay, Roschon's not really a lead back. Because a lot of guys got hurt. Herbert got hurt. Foreman got hurt last year. And you never really saw Roschon just in this elite role. So they kind of told us what they thought about it. But they also told us what they thought about Herbert last year as well. Because they brought in D'Onta Foreman. And D'Onta Foreman got quite a bit of run. And then this year, they immediately went out and drafted and signed DeAndre Swift to a significant contract. Again, I was not on DeAndre Swift last year. I am in on him this year for the sole reason is I think as a whole, through the receptions, through being in an explosive offense, through him potentially, I think, running better in this type of system than in the system that he ran in with the Eagles, that I think there's enough there that he can pay off his ADP value. Is he going to be a true goal line back? I don't think so, but I don't think he needs to be. I really see a situation where I think they're actually going to use him quite a bit in the passing game. And he just looks so comfortable catching the ball out of the backfield. I think if used in the right role, to me, I think of kind of like an Alvin Kamara type role where it's more like, yes, he's a running back, but he presents such a threat and has so much skill in the passing game that if they incorporate that, I think he can be an absolute steal at his ADP.
Yeah, one thing I keep coming back to is like they signed him immediately. Like free agency open, and he was like the first signing. Yep. They really had their heart set on him. To me, though, just Matt Eberflus, he loves a committee. Yes. I'm worried it's Herbert, Roschon splitting early down work. Yeah. Roschon maybe in pass pro. And it just doesn't leave much for Swift, although he should lead the backfield in fantasy points. But maybe I'm wrong. And honestly, I have no idea what his ADP is. So it's possible he's a great value. When you give me at least one more, give me a wide receiver.
Oh, sorry, one last running back, and this is a perfect time to mention it. One last running back, Tyrone Tracy. Okay.
Oh, hell yeah.
Tyrone Tracy. Yeah. Okay. So and a lot of people will talk about, well, he's still kind of learning the position to some degree, but he played running back in high school. I mean, he played everything in high school, but he played a lot of running back in high school. So it's not like he's just like completely new or was new to the position of running back, that last year in college. And just go watch his tape. Just watch his tape. Like, it doesn't need to be highlights. Just watch his tape, and he looks like a running back. And the fact that he can, actually catch passes as well. And I don't want to knock Devin Singletary. I still think he's a great value pick, but that's a situation like, kind of halfway throughout the year, especially if they're not winning games and they kind of want to give other guys a look. That's a situation where I want that guy on my team heading into the money weeks. If I got to hold him, the entire year and not start him until week 15, I'll do it. But yeah, what other position did you want to hear?
I'm just so with you on Tyrone Tracy. Yeah. So great call. Yeah. When you give me some wide receivers and we could wrap it up with that.
Okay. So my top 5 wide receivers. Number 1, Christian Kirk.
Oh.
Number 2, Deontay Johnson. Number 3, Chris Godwin.
Hell yeah.
Number 4, sadly, Marvin Mims. I think I would not be drafting anymore. I will not be drafting anymore Marvin Mims. Well, he goes. Yeah. He goes late. But no more Marvin Mims. And then to round it out, Calvin Ridley and Jermaine Burton. So, those are like mid-round guys that just sort of kind of, people are not necessarily excited about taking. But I really like these guys. And, Christian Kirk, okay, maybe his ceiling is somewhat capped. But I still think, if all things break right, you can see him finish as a wide receiver 13, 14. And where he's going, I really like that. I think it's, steady points. But Chris Godwin, to me,
Hold on. Let's take it point by point, if you don't mind. Christian Kirk. So the concern with him is that in the preseason this year, he was off the field in 2 wide receiver sets. This also happened last preseason, and it
Yes.
happened
Yes.
in week 1.
Yes.
And then Zay Jones got hurt, and then he was a full-time player in 2 wide receiver
Yes.
sets. And I was like, oh, okay, this is real. This is what they want to do.
Yeah.
This is a big concern. And then I looked into it. You could look into it yourself in the Fantasy Point data suite. By the way, the Jaguars were top 5 in 12 personnel, top 5 in pass rate in 12 personnel. So I thought this would be massive. I pulled it up in the data suite. He only had 12 targets in 12 personnel all last year. So like, it doesn't really matter. Like, it's just like he was an afterthought anyway. So I think that's overblown. Why don't you sell me on Christian Kirk? He's someone I'm more torn on. Like, if you look at my rankings, it doesn't seem like I'm high on him, but like as a value, I totally see it. So why don't you make the pitch?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing too is value. I think you can get him at the back end of the 5th, 6th round in the FFPC format. Steady target. To me, this is really based on the type of offense that Doug Peterson runs. It's really that intermediate game. That's why I also like Evan Ingram. And now, again, kind of going back to like having like actual legit deep threats. Calvin Ridley, he was kind of playing a miscast role, as the primary X and someone pushing the boundaries and, kind of extent, running, go routes and sevens and things like that, or post routes. But I like the addition of Brian Thomas. I love that they brought in Gabe Davis. I think, as much, heat as Gabe Davis, gets, I still think he's someone that, is somewhat of a bigger body, deep threat downfield that you have to account for. But to me, those guys are just decoys in the Doug Peterson offense. Like, to me, the Doug Peterson offense is like high efficiency, high accuracy, high percentage throws. And that's the short and intermediate route. And who operates in those areas? Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram. So to me, those guys are clearly the 1A and 1B as far as the reception leaders and target leaders in that offense. And you already mentioned, the limitations of Trevor Lawrence, and I agree with that. You don't need, this isn't an offense that has Trevor Lawrence, dropping back and reading the defense and then deciding where to go. He's not Tom Brady. It's not a Tom Brady type offense. To me, this is an offense that is, this is your first read, this is your second read, this is your third read. And I think more oftentimes than not, Christian Kirk is going to be that first read, which actually I need to write a note to go back and look at games played. What was Christian Kirk's first read percentage? I think that'll be interesting over the last 2 years. It may also kind of give some insight as to whether or not, he's worth the pick.
Yeah. Shout out to the Fantasy Points data suite. You can check that out yourself to see where Christian Kirk ranks in first read targets, first read target share. All right. So you hit on Deontay, Chris Godwin, and Calvin Ridley. And I'll hit on all three at once. You can dive into each individually, but you were saying before how like your podcast is not really that stats driven. It's more game theory and stuff like that. And like, that's also wildly true of my rankings. Like I'm very much a stats guy. I have like dang stats for every player and that feeds into my rankings, but like so often it's really just, like a simple logic. And it's for me, Deontay Johnson, a player I've always loved who, ranks top 3 every single year has been in the league by separation, whether that's our new stat that's about to come out, average separation score, or ESPN's open score, next gen stats. Really good player, I believe in. He is going to play the Mike Evans, Dave Canales, Alpha X role in this Panthers offense without much target competition. You have Calvin Ridley. Brian Callahan has said he's going to play the Jamar Chase role for us. What does that look like? Jamar Chase led the league in screens last year, basically a free 3-point fantasy point per game boost just on screens. He's going to be used a ton in motion. I get he's not Jamar Chase, the talent, but that's a vastly, wildly valuable role. And then Chris Godwin, same thing. He was in the Dave Canales slot role, which is not a valuable role. For one thing, Dave Canales does not scheme up a lot of screens, manufactured touches for the slot. That's why we were down on him last year. But now you have this new offensive coordinator, Liam Cohen, saying he's going to use him in the Cooper Kupp role, which means lots of screens, which is what he's always done. He's going to be in the slot full time, which is where he belongs and where he's put up a ton of points. And so like, give me that. That is just like whatever stats, throw those out. So I'm also like, don't underrate Calvin Ridley lost an entire year. Like
Yeah,
most,
exactly.
unless you're Jamar Chase, like it's tough to come back and be a stud right away from
Yeah.
that. So I'm with you on all three. And yeah, I think those are all great calls.
Yeah. No, 100% agree with all of those. And sometimes like in some ways, like in kind of how you laid out, fantasy is easy. What I did I was on Chris Evans last year because Dave Canales went to Tampa Bay. I know he had a narrow target tree. Okay, who's going to be the DK Metcalf in this offense? Okay, Mike Evans is going significantly later than Chris Godwin. I'll just take the guy. People just didn't want to draft Mike Evans last year. He's going in the 8th round. It was one of those weird things. I was taking so much Mike Evans. And the same thing with Amari Cooper. You start taking so much of these guys and you start to kind of question it like, damn, everyone is out on these guys? I must be wrong. So I just sort of I do a lot of that, and sometimes maybe you get burned a little bit, but for the most part, these offensive coordinators really aren't coming with brand new playbooks, brand new ideas. For the most part, they're doing a lot of what they did, where they were before. So even Michael Pittman from last year, he was going in the 7th and 8th round, just knowing, who his head coach was, where he's coming from, how he uses the RPO, who was going to be the first read target, or first read option in that system. All those simple things are like, I think are really, really helpful. Terry McLaurin's another guy as well. I think I kind of almost, and this is a little scary because I don't think he's as good as DeAndre Hopkins, but I'm basically kind of envisioning DeAndre Hopkins in that type of role, or Terry McLaurin in the DeAndre Hopkins role in that offense. So,
yeah, I think that's a good shout. I could see it, especially given my love of Jayden Daniels.
Yeah.
Where I really think he could just be awesome as a passer, in addition to giving us that sky high rushing floor. Although I've personally been targeting, I guess more so best ball. I haven't done an FFPC draft. Luke McCaffrey, which by the way, now could be Jahan Dotson for the same reason, because Dotson was like basically full-time slot in the preseason, but they played him deep enough with the second string that it seems like that's up in the air where McCaffrey has a chance to supplant him and be the full-time. But anyway, Jim Nagy, good friend of the podcast, good friend of mine, director of the Senior Bowl, former scout of multiple Super Bowl winning teams, which had Wes Welker and Julian Edelman on them, by the way. But he keeps telling me that this year's Puka Nacua is Luka McCaffrey. Like, I'll put out a tweet like, there is no this year's Puka Nacua. He's like, no, it's Luke McCaffrey. Or I'm like Puka Nacua had this yards per route run that last year. And he's like, just chiming in to remind you that this year's Puka Nacua is Luke McCaffrey. So anyway, I've just been going the cheaper route just because Cliff Kingsbury's offense just so slot dominant, target slots like crazy. But I could definitely see that for a player we all know is good and has like deserved better. And you've seen this with Chris Olave, Drake London, where they're like priced far and above any finish they've ever had, where it's just like, well, they deserve better and they should finally have it. But that's not the case with Terry McLaurin. I did want to circle back around on my guy, Marvin Mims. Yeah. And I guess you're saying like it's over based on preseason usage.
It's over. Well, and last year's usage. I just think it's over. I think he's just going to be a clear out guy. I just think, and
we've seen that before with that offense too.
Yeah, I just think he's going to be a clear out guy, and I think it's going to be a guy. I think it's going to be a random guy. I don't even think it's going to be Cortland Sutton. I've never
Tim
been
Patrick.
It could be Tim Patrick. It could be this rookie.
Josh Reynolds?
Not Josh. I doubt it's Josh Reynolds.
Oh, Veely, the new rookie?
Yeah. I mean, it could literally be anyone. Sean. Don't
Veely has
Sean
some
Payton.
Marcus Colston vibes.
Yeah.
And I watched that presser. They really like him.
Yeah. So don't put it past Sean Payton to just have a guy come out of nowhere. That's why I've been drafting Lucas Kroll throughout the offseason. He's one of the head coaches where I'm just like, I don't know.
We got to take a pause real quick on Lucas Kroll. Adam Schefter told us week 15 last year, Sean Payton loves like Lucas Kroll might be his favorite player of all time. Yeah. And you've heard so much of that coming out this offseason, although now Dulcich is back and healthy, so we'll see. But
yeah.
All right. Well, any tight end you want to give us before we sign off, or you think we covered just about everything and you lost all your alpha on the season, and
you know what?
Your win rates are going to decline from here on out.
This is just going to force me to diversify. I mean, I think we pretty much cover them. I'll mention two guys, two that are just kind of getting like literally no love whatsoever. An honorable mention to George Kittle, because if a trade goes down in FFPC, Who
Game
knows?
over.
Yeah, who knows? So, get some now because
That's right. That's right. You got to factor in that upside.
yeah, because right now he's just going where he typically goes, like in the fifth round. Like his ADP
Mhm.
really hasn't changed at all. But one guy I would mention is Hunter Henry. Um,
Okay. Okay.
so I one way, when I was like, bargain hunting for tight ends in years previous, I always just look towards offenses where there's just questionable wide receiver or a receiving core, questionable, who's going to be getting targets here, and there's no clear alpha, there's no clear cut, number one guy or even a number two guy, and to me, this is that offense. He's the incumbent. They seem to really, really like him. I've heard, I've heard a couple of clips. What's the quarterback's name? I forget. He probably won't be quarterback for the entire season.
You're talking about Jacoby Brissett?
Yeah, Jacoby Brissett. Yeah, yeah. There've been a couple clips of him talking about how he likes tight ends, and so people don't listen for it, and you don't look for it. But I think Hunter Henry's actually been, someone who's been, pretty prominent in the beat writing report from the Patriots camp. And if he does get the targets, because I mean, breaking news, they just drafted, Judon. So this team's going to be bad. This team's going to be bad. So he's someone who could potentially see quite a few receptions. And then the last guy, this is sort of kind of another injury discount and kind of an unknown situation. A lot would have to kind of go right, but Juwan Johnson, I was kind of high on him last year. He just seems like an athletic type profile that in the right system, and he can do enough in the blocking, when it comes to blocking, where I feel like even with Taysom Hill being on the team, he's someone who can really do quite a bit. And cars seem to really like him in the red zone. So that's a guy that just goes very, very cheap. And Hayden Hurst, I'm just going to die on that hill. So
I like it, man. Like we were saying, there's a lot of value in that, in these cheap tight ends. Don't underestimate the floor they can provide in the flex and spike weeks. Hunter Henry's interesting. I need to give him another look. If you look back at like every top 6 tight end in fantasy for the last like 5 years, they were always either like the number 1 or number 2 target in their offense. And given the wide receivers they have, it would not surprise me if Henry finishes top 2 in targets for that offense this year. But Abib, this was amazing. This was so valuable. I really think like just this one podcast has given our subs such a tremendous edge for FFPC drafts, which again are so much fun. They are a sponsor. Promo code points for $25 off. But even if they weren't a sponsor, I would hype them up just the same, as I love the format. And I'll give you a chance to plug your podcast, plug anything else you want to plug, but also we're going to be doing a draft soon. I don't think we have the date yet, but you, me, Theo, Greminger are going to try and repeat and do another main event draft, try and win the 12-man and then win it all.
Yeah, that's absolutely. We're going for the grand prize. We're not happy, and we're not okay with just winning the league. We want it all.
That's right.
All. So be on the lookout for that. I think that'll probably get, we'll probably drop a show on that too as well. But yeah, Scott, thanks for having me. And for anyone who's kind of unfamiliar, yes, we have a podcast that I shoot with good friend Deo, Chris,
Dr. Deo,
Dr. Deo Adesay, I guess JD, Doctor Lawyer, Christopher Henderson, who's our esteemed producer. And does a lot of work behind the scenes, and would be no pod without him. But first and 15, we are, I think, unique from a standpoint of like we are in the game. Like we are, like I am a high stakes player first before I'm anything else after. None of us consider ourselves analysts. We don't consider ourselves, even experts in any way. We just, we love talking football. We love talking fantasy. And we decided, one day we're talking too much. You might as well just put it on wax and record it. So hoping to have Scott out at the next show.
I'm coming on it for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's who you want to listen to. The people with skin in the game who've had real results, over $1 million in winnings. So shout out to you. Thanks. Shout out to your podcast. Thanks for coming on. Can't wait to do this live draft with you. And I hope one of us wins it all this year.
Absolutely.
All right. Thanks, Abib.
All right. You guys enjoy the rest of your night.